Sup, y'all. I am your host, Tayler Onion. This is Hang Time, where we focus on amplifying the stories of women in sports. We are back this week with Ashima Chopra, the founder and CEO of FanVerse, which is a data intelligence company translating belongingness into actionable insights on women fans for the sports industry. Ashima, welcome. Let's get some hang time.
I'm super excited.
Uh,
Let's do it.
Absolutely. So we met a few weeks ago at the Women Leaders in Sports National Convention. You sat on a panel there that was arguably my favorite part of the entire conference. It was the perfect way to wrap up my experience there. But that panel, you and the other panelists were talking about how risk management drives fan engagement and ROI. If you had a sentence or two to kind of sum up some of the main points that you and the other panelists made on that in that session, what would you say?
Yeah. Firstly, I'm so glad to hear that that it resonated and landed with you. Lots of great insights shared, and I was thinking about this even after the fact. In my research leading up to the panel and then post panel, as I was having different conversations with people, and including you. And I think one of the most prevalent things for me was understanding your fans is truly the ultimate form of risk management because it takes out guesswork, it reduces assumptions that are being made, it strengthens engagement that you're having between your fans and your athletes, your fans and your team, your fans in the league. And all of that directly drives ROI and revenue. So when you're able to, and now even bringing Fanverse into this, tap into the most overlooked revenue opportunity in sports, being female fans, that is a brilliant way to be able to think about risk, mitigate risk, and actively strategize and plan for risk, because it leads to truly all of the things that I mentioned. Reducing guesswork and really being able to drive ROI and revenue.
So much of what you just mentioned, it makes me think of the book Invisible Women. And I was reading an article last night, which was talking about you and Fanverse and kind of how everything came to be. But it's talking about that book specifically is talking about in healthcare, medicines and equipment are tested on men and not typically on women. In farming, the equipment is typically made for men and not for women. And the list goes on and on. Can you share maybe a little bit of motivation or a little bit of that gap that you saw as it relates to the sports industry? Like what led you to create Fanverse?
Yeah, so I grew up playing soccer. I was the only girl in an all boys soccer league, and I was never asked what position I wanted to play. And that idea, that concept, that feeling of being excluded, of not feeling like I was part of the conversation, of not really being asked for my opinion or thought or what value that I really brought to the table is something from playing sports to being a lawyer to venture capital to now founding Fanverse that I feel like is such a through line and a thread as to why I started Fanverse. I don't know if I shared this with you, but back in November, I took part in a national AI hackathon where 75 women across Canada competed, and Fanverse ended up winning first place.
Amazing.
And thank you. And I share that almost less for the accolade, but for what happened after, which was even after winning the hackathon, it wasn't necessarily like, okay, like time to start a business and this is really going to become a thing. Is during the hackathon, we had to conduct market user research and validation. Like, is there truly a problem that exists for female fans? And if so, what does that look like? Like, what do they want more of? Do they want more merchandise? Do they want more game day experiences? How do they feel like their fan experience is lacking, is not customized, and is not something that's valued in sports? And naively, I was shocked by the number of people who had filled out the survey that were contacting me to ask me if I was doing anything about this.
Mm.
Like they were like, "Hey, so we filled out that thing and we never really like heard back from you. Like we know you won, but are you doing anything with this data and with this research?" And I feel like that was the catalyst for me, that there is such a need and desire from fans, both diehard fans, both fans that are like into the lifestyle, the culture, the fashion at the intersection of sports, and new fans who want to get into it, but again, have just never felt like they are a part of the conversation or have never felt included or like they belong. And that was like the moment where I was like, okay, like I need to actually make this happen, because clearly there's a problem and people want a solution, and I feel like FanVerse is that solution for them. So I often share that like growing up as like a brown immigrant and transitioning from different career paths, I never really knew what was my thing. Like I always felt like I was trying to fit myself into a mold or into a box. And I feel like Fanverse has been that culmination of all those moments where I felt like I'm the only or I haven't been included. How can I create that space for others and for the next generation truly of sports fans, but also sports leaders?
I think some of the most impactful things that we see in the sports marketplace are exactly what you just described, right? Like where it's the culmination of all the experiences that you've had to date. It's something that you're really passionate about, of course, and all those things. So it's just fun to hear, how things came to be and kind of the motivation behind that. When you think about some of the early challenges that you faced, I'm assuming in entrepreneurship there are challenges here and there. When you think about those, what are some of the things, has there been anything maybe that you thought, okay, this is not actually what I want to do? Or have those challenges been kind of reaffirming to you in the sense that, like, well, this is annoying to deal with, but I love this and what I'm doing with it so much that I'm going to persist?
Yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, um, there are so many challenges. I truly feel like every day since I launched back in, it's been around 7, 8 months now. Every day since I launched is me committing to making this work, me committing to the mission, and because of how deeply I care. And I say it's a commitment because that commitment is challenged on quite literally an everyday basis,
Mm.
as a founder and as an entrepreneur, being a woman in sports tech, all those things that I've learned, and I'm learning to reframe that almost like scarcity and like lack of women and less than, 2% of women receive venture capital, to turn all those stats into like, okay, there's an opportunity for me here. And this is actually how I differentiate myself. And this is why I'm betting on myself and I'm going to make this a reality. So coming back to your question of like, the daily challenges, one of the biggest ones, and I often share this with like whenever I'm talking to various stakeholders, whether that's investors or fans or partners or sponsors, is that for for the amount of benefits that I've been able to cultivate, like the strengths and the skills that I've been able to cultivate as a lawyer, related to how thorough I am with my research, and just being so well equipped to think about facts and think about data and how to present that in a on the opposite side of that is, as a founder and as an entrepreneur, my business has changed multiple times,
Mm.
even just since November. And so, this idea of like iteration, of not having all of the answers, of not knowing the answers to all of the questions that I'm asked or that even within my own mind come up, that for me, I think has been the biggest struggle, because particularly as a lawyer, like having the facts of the case and having the materials and being able to strategize and plan a well thought up proposal or well thought up argument is what I've been taught. And this journey is totally turning that on its head, where it's actually you're not going to have all the answers. And I mean, there's so many analogies to describe like you're like building the plane while flying it, like all of like the fun analogies that we hear about. You do it even before you're ready, you go even before you're ready, you plan for the next step and hope that you'll be able to figure out the next 5 steps while you're planning for the next step. I think that, yeah, like that has been one of the biggest challenges, is just like, okay, like I'm going to be able to figure it out, and it's okay if I don't have all the answers. Like, how do I resource myself? How do I ask someone within my network? How do I ask a referral for someone to help me with the financial model or whatever it might be? I think it's very just like you have to have this, yeah, deep sense of daily commitment to what you're doing and such a belief in what you're building.
I think in women's sports specifically right now, like men's sports might be in a place where some of these systems have existed for a long time so that you can build a case around it, or kind of get all your facts ready before launch. In women's
Mm,
sports, the change that has happened from even just 5 years ago to where we are today, if you waited to try and put together a case, you would miss the opportunity, right?
yeah.
Like there's so much that's changing so quickly. So it's interesting to hear that from the entrepreneur side of things too. When it comes to FanVerse, and we've talked a little bit about the research, the data that y'all are pulling, how do you stand out from other fan engagement platforms? I think there are a lot of folks right now. I don't want to say that the space certainly is not crowded. We need so many more voices and folks doing this work in women's sports. But what sets you apart? Like, what's the um, I can't even think of the word right now. I'll leave it at that. What
Okay.
sets you
No,
apart?
no, like I think this is such a great question. And I totally get what you're asking and what you're trying to get at. I think for us the keyword has been like predictive, like to be able to predict the next action of a fan
Mm.
by when we know and when we're able to decode who they are, why they show up, and what makes them stay. That is what creates a prediction for what they might do next, or what they might buy into next, or what they might want next. And I think that is what makes us different in being able to not just grow the data set or capture the data on female fans, but to really segment it by fan profiles and fan personas so that we understand, again, the next kind of like action for a fan, and how that can then affect the way the team, the way the league, the way brands think about not just their fan engagement strategies, but their marketing strategies, their sponsorship strategies, the way they think about endorsement deals or certain brands that they partner with or that they affiliate themselves and their athletes with. So that's where I really see us being that difference maker, because again, coming to the crux and the core of female fans as the biggest influencers, the biggest decision makers, the biggest purchasers, how are we, again, not just capturing like gendered data, but really being able to segment that data, decode that data, and provide those insights to teams, leagues, and brands so that they can better understand and engage their female fans that are often new fans who have come through an entry point like pop culture or like lifestyle, and use that to cultivate strategies that, I mean, when we think about like long-term scalability and long-term revenue and potential, these are the types of insights that affect that. So that's what I would say is like this idea of being predictive and being able to actually cultivate fan personas and profiles that provide insights on how teams, leagues, and brands are thinking about their overall business strategy.
What are some ways that technology plays into that, maybe for Fanverse specifically? Because I know you also do like in-person events and try to collect data and gather it that way. So what are some ways you would say that like technology is kind of transforming the space right now?
Yeah, I it's been wildly interesting to start with activations and the way that we're capturing first party fan data, because the biggest insight that I've gained is how majority of women that have come to our activations, across soccer, across rugby, across hockey are like what we like to call solo fans.
Mm.
So they have never actually watched a game before, or they quite literally come solo, thinking of kind of that passive scroller. And in having these conversations with these women, I've been continually reminded that it's not necessarily that they don't want to get into sports or they've never been interested in it, but it's just never been marketed with them in mind. And so through our activations and building them for and by women, and like to give a very real example of this, at one of the activations that we did for the Women's Rugby World Cup, we had a nail artist
Mm.
who you could choose a design that was like inspired by rugby, or inspired by the sport or inspired by FanVerse. When you start creating these like entry points where women again feel like they belong and they're a part of the conversation, they've now bought tickets to the next game. They're looking at who within their local region like plays sports or has a rugby team for them to actually get involved in. They're telling their friends that they went to this really cool party and like they know a little bit more about rugby and you know they should get together and go to the next game, or when the season does start, you know, they should hang out together and go together. That type of transition and conversion from like that solo fan to that social fan who spends, who shares, who returns often is where now we're bringing the tech in to capture what are the fan touch points where we're turning like belongingness and passion into actually predictive, monetizable insight for the sports industry. And I think also where that tech piece comes in and where that AI piece comes in, and AI helping decode that data to be able to develop like predictors. Again, why does a fan show up? What are they spending on? How are they engaging? What keeps them returning often? What is that retention rate? Is where I think like that sweet spot of the tech and of the AI really lies. And I would also say like we're seeing this even across when we think about content and when we think about the way women are consuming content. It's a lot more participatory
Mm.
for women fans. Traditional models that, you know, again, built kind of like for the male viewer or the male watcher or the male consumer is kind of this like one-way style broadcast. Whereas with female fans, and we've noticed this in our own content, in our own storytelling and in our own social media, and of course through our activations, that, you know, from the behind the scenes to athletes mixing with fans to storytelling around women's sports, which, you know, is something that you do so well, is like this is an open opportunity to create that dialogue where it's no longer just like a one-way broadcast or like talking at people, but actually including and having more women fans participate in the conversation. And again, I think tech is a really great way of being able to understand that data, understand what are the entry points that women are coming in, and how can we truly like capitalize on that, so that we can give more female fans what they're looking for, make them feel like they belong, and actually cater to them as fans and also as consumers.
I was just, I mean, almost verbatim to my sports media class yesterday morning having this conversation. I
Love that.
think one of the interesting things about what we're seeing in the women's sports really marketplace right now, when we historically, when we've thought about sports, you're thinking about a bunch of dudes hanging out at a sports bar or in somebody's basement, you know, cheering on their favorite team. But to your point, kind of a one-way conversation.
Mm.
Like sports are just this one thing. They're just sports. And I think on the women's side, we're now seeing, oh, sports are also culture and they're also fashion and they're also like there's books and literature and all these other pieces that, and candles and nails and all these other
Yeah.
things that are built into the women's sports fan marketplace. It's
Mm.
so interesting to see how kind of multifaceted it is. And I'm so excited to watch, you know, and continue to see the things that FanVerse uncovers in that space too. You touched on a little bit kind of the role of AI. When we think about AI, AR, augmented reality, even community driven media, there's so many influencers right now too that are taking media content from like the big media companies and re-spinning it with their own kind of nuanced thoughts, myself included. How do you think those things drive or have the potential to shape the future of women's sports media and women's sports fandom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like touching upon even AR for a brief second and just like immersive tech, I think we're seeing this and I love that word that you used of multifaceted because I think female fans are not a monolith. We're not secondary. We are very multifaceted, and that's that could be a whole conversation in itself. But we're seeing how AR and immersive tech can really create new fan experiences. And so, to your point of how multifaceted we are, where it's the lifestyle, it's the culture, it's the fashion, it's business. I think that AI, AR tech has such an incredible opportunity to be able to enhance that and integrate into that. And I was recently listening to, I was a part of a webinar actually right before this, and they were talking about how there's going to be a turning point
Mm.
where AI is actually more subtractive than additive, i.e., there's going to be this turning point where we're going to see more personalized, customized, like fan predictors and insights, where it's no longer about like, here's all the data or here's all that's happening, but we're going to make it super specific and super niche for you, tailored to your interests and your wants and your needs as a fan, where it's not like, oh, we're adding on or we're adding more data or we're adding more to your life, but getting super specific about what you want and then actually tailoring what you see from, who's playing in your area to what kind of apparel companies would most speak to you, to what game day experiences, or if an athlete is doing a meet and greet, or if there's a podcast that you should be listening to or content that you should be consuming, it is so tailored and it is so specific to you as a fan. So I think that's where it becomes really interesting because for a lot of women, storytelling and athletes and the journey and the behind the scenes is that entry point. And so if an athlete or a broadcaster or a podcaster can create the sense of stickiness in what they're sharing
Mm.
and what they're telling and the stories that they're talking about, like as a female women viewer, it's like an immediate in. And I think I also say that because there's so many options and there's such an oversaturation of options that are available to us when it comes to like newsletters and podcasts and Substacks and all the rest of it. And so I think when you're able to establish that relationship in your messaging and in the way that you position yourself, again, as a creator, as an influencer, as a podcaster, as a writer, there's something really interesting there about how that creates such a, yeah, just like a sticky point for consumers and for fans who are like, I'm going to invest my time, attention, energy, and money into this content or into this storytelling because it is what truly speaks to me. And so, putting it in my calendar that like every Tuesday, this person releases, an episode or whatever. I think that's where what we're going to see when it comes to like content and storytelling and how people are going to be able to cultivate such like sticky audiences, just again based upon a certain niche that they've chosen or something that they're talking about or their own journey or their own story. I think like that is truly what comes to mind when I think about the media and storytelling aspect and how like AI and tech interplays with that.
The analogy I was thinking of as you were walking through all that is uniforms in women's sports,
Mhm.
right? Years ago, we saw pretty much the WNBA was created, just give them the men's uniforms and we'll just order smaller sizes, right? Like you can see those uniforms over the course of the last almost 30 years now go from these huge baggy shorts, the sleeves are like way over the shoulders, all these things, to now uniforms that are form fitting is not the right word, but there's not like as much fabric. They're clearly, pieces of apparel that are built for women athletes. They've got kind of like a racer back situation going on in some cases, and still they are unique to the individual athlete. So the uniform and even like the shorts, I'm thinking Diana Taurasi still was able to wear, shorts and something that was like baggier for her. Paige Beckers now is
Yeah,
different than what we're seeing on the Asia Wilsons and the Angel Reeses of the league, right? So these, again, just to dumb it all the way down to apparel, and when you started to ask questions of those athletes, like, hey, what would make sense for how you move in the game and what you might
right.
need, how much that stuff has again shifted over the last 30 years is an interesting thing to think about. I want to shift and ask you what's next for FanVerse right now. Is there anything that you're excited about? Anything you can share that's coming up? Innovations, partnerships, any of the above?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest like this is yeah, I'm like this is pretty immediate because the Northern Super League is currently on, and we have the finals coming up on the 15th. We are bringing a big group to the Northern Super League finals happening here in Toronto. So I'm really excited about that. It's such a they launched in January of this year. It's such a historical inaugural season, and what an incredible way to cap it off. We've partnered with uh, like we're really doing like a cross sports collaboration with it, bringing basketball players, flag football players, soccer players, fans together to create this experience, which I think is also such a like salient point to add to this, because I think it touches upon so much of what we've spoken about in relation to like how we think about women's sports, how we think about collaboration over competition, how we think about bringing organizations and people in, because women's sports allows for creative ways of thinking and more innovative ways of thinking. It's not kind of outdated or transactional or standstill. And so how do we really like leverage that opportunity here? So that's an IRL experience that's coming up. And then we've launched our investor round, which is wildly exciting and exhausting in all of the ways. And so yeah, that's been great to actually talk to people who want to invest in us and who want to invest in building the data infrastructure that will be able to do all the things we spoke about related to segmenting female fans and really being able to monetize it. And for me, that's incredibly exciting that time, attention, energy, money, and resources will be going into this, and where that can lead when we do talk about certain leagues and teams and brands that we're in talks with about piloting our platform and our tech. So yeah, those are some exciting things that we're planning for and are actively working through.
Definitely very exciting. When we look at some predictions, I guess, from you. So we've talked a lot about predictive data and how do we, kind of get into the head of the female sports fan. What are your predictions for where women's sports fandom and storytelling specifically are headed in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. I read this interesting, like less of a quote. It was more of a statement. I think it was in a report that I read. And it was essentially saying that fandom does not equate to audience.
Mm.
Um, and and I found that interesting because I'm like, oh, this is like so spot on with FanVerse when you talk about how multifaceted we are, how there's like an entirely, untapped set of fans that we're not building for monoliths, again, that we're super multifaceted. And I think this is also fascinating because of the fact that, women account for such a rising share of fandom, not just in women's sports, but even in men's sports. Like the numbers are around like 46% of when we talk about any professional men's league are female fans. And so from sponsorship to how we think about all of the things that we mentioned, from like merchandise to marketing, how are we really accounting for the fact that there are touch points related to identity, related to lifestyle, related to culture that have just not really been included as something that we necessarily track. And I think that's going to be really interesting, is like how different levers are pulled as it relates to female fans, and really understanding them. And then I think that, and like I wrote this in my notes here, which I feel like we see this all over LinkedIn, which is just like sponsor spend in women's sports is growing faster than men's leagues.
Mm-hmm.
It's exceeding ROI, expectations, measurements, and I think that this is just going to lead to bigger multi-year commitments um, across leagues, from like, yeah, just like creator clubs to like storytelling to the way that we think about media. I think like merchandise is so untapped. And yeah, like those are really some of the things that I think about, is just the way that we think about fandom, and how that's going to change as we start appealing to and tapping into more female fans.
This is so interesting, the jumps that we're seeing right now in sponsorships and ROI, because in some ways, this is like the oldest advertising trick in the book, right? Like in
Mhm.
the 40s, 50s, 60s, companies like men's cologne companies started marketing to wives, like your husband could smell so good. And
Right.
like the things, like the revenue went, it like spiked after those things. So it's just so, it's funny because we continue to talk about this as like a very novel thing, and a kind of new trend, right? The
Mhm.
women's sports fandom and these things, but it really is like this again. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, and we just
Yeah,
have to, again, put the resources and the money and the interest, behind it to be able to kind of untap this quote unquote new market. So it's all
totally.
it's all so interesting.
Yeah.
All right,
And
last.
I was just gonna quickly say, like, I just love that you said this, because I sometimes also have to check myself when I use the word data, because like how much data do we need to just like get it? Like to just like get that this is smart business, that you're leaving money on the table by not doing this, that like you said, this is not like some like, oh, like novel idea that like women love, having a cute fit. Like that's not something that is yeah, like is like some like novel innovative idea. And so I think the data is wonderful to have. I think it reinforces a lot of things. I think, speaking of risk, it leads to being able to manage risk. But like, yeah, like when is it that like I don't, like, you either get it or you don't, to be honest. And for me, it's like I don't understand if you don't get it, because it is so plainly crystal clear to me.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate reality is that without the data, there
Mhm.
sometimes seems like there's no leg to stand on, right? Like this is something
Right.
you can very clearly say, look, we have like these are the
Mhm.
facts, these are the receipts. I think
Mhm.
I'm thinking of I just was reading this post not long ago about the WNBA and the ESPN deal from like 2003, 4, and one guy said nobody watches women's basketball, nobody cares about this, even though from 1997 until it's like the first 5 years
Right.
of the league's existence, they're selling out arenas. Average attendance was at like 9, 10,000, which for a brand new league is amazing. They're getting millions of viewers. I think the opening night was like 5 million viewers on
Wow.
what, NBC even, or something like that. But because one guy had the opinion that nobody wants to watch this, it tanked it, right? And we saw viewership down, we saw attendance down, like relegated to ESPN2, not showing highlights or any of these things. And so, again, the unfortunate reality is that right now, we still
Mhm.
have to have the data to
Yeah.
back up something that, again, is a tale as old as time. Like, advertisers have been doing these things for years, but again, it just seems it's been packaged as novel right now and kind of a risk, and so
Mhm.
it's interesting to consider. But okay,
Yeah.
last question here that I have for you: if you could get some hang time with any woman in sports, who would it be and why?
I think I feel like this is such a like so many people would have this answer. It would likely be Billie Jean King. I
Mm,
mean, I just I she's been through so many evolving generations and decades of what we've been talking about that I would love to speak to her about just for me, it's also just more about the resilience, the keep on keeping on.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's also, probably being a founder and being in the trenches and being in the mud of it, where it's like even just to your last point, like you still have to talk about the data, you still have to prove certain things, you still have to provide certain statistics. And even after all of that, it still may be a no, it still may be a I don't like this is like, yeah, like a so-so opportunity, but like we're not actually sure of it. Yeah, I would love to speak to her just about that tenacity. I mean, like her very famous quote now, pressure is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's someone that I'd love to talk to and love to meet.
I'm gonna invite myself to that hang time because I
Yes. We'll have a yes, yes, I
I
love
would,
this.
yeah, I'd like to be there as well. All right, where can listeners get involved? How can they support FanVerse? Where can they follow you? All the things.
Yeah, you can follow us at We Are Fanverse on all socials. We're most prominent on Instagram, and we're also on LinkedIn. You can check out our website, subscribe to our newsletter, where we'll be sharing more about the journey of building this thing and where we go next. And super excited for Q4 and also 2026. Yeah, that's how people can find out who we are.
I love it. Well, Ashima, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. This has been great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was so good. So good.